And Lackington looks at Percy's offer of how much money they want and what they're willing to do and how many they want published. And Lackington writes back and says, yeah, this is a great idea. I like this book. I'll publish this book. Well, when I was doing all of this research, and I was reading biography after biography after biography of Mary Shelley, reading history after history of Frankenstein, there was this strange thing that kept happening. And, this is what it means for me to do research. What I kept reading over and over again was that no critic, and if the book was from 2 years ago, no critic was somehow able to mention that the book was published by Lackington without saying something bad about Lackington. And I thought, what's going on here? People who weren't really that thorough in their writing when they got to Lackington would stop to add on half of a sentence or to throw a whole sentence in to say something bad about Lackington. And I'm thinking, well, what is it? And I didn't know anything about Lackington. But they were saying everything from, this was a second-hand place, or a low-level, backstreet publisher named Lackington, or, Lackington only published books of the occult and weird stuff. And so I started doing research on Lackington. Well, James Lackington, who is just an extraordinary figure and a great piece of the Frankenstein puzzle. James Lackington was a cobbler by trade. And as a cobbler, he read voluminously. And he kept his family dirt poor by spending all of the money that came in on books. And eventually he decided that he would sell the cobbler business, and he and his wife would move to London, and he would become a bookseller. So this is a story, it's an anecdote, there's no proof. They get to London on the first night of this new part of their lives. They've sold the cobbler business. All the money's been poured into books. They only have a tiny, tiny amount of money left. And Lackington's wife says to him, go out and get some food and bring it back. And Lackington goes out and comes back with a book of poetry. And, his wife, you can just imagine, right? His wife says, oh my God, I sent you out to get some bread and some cheese, and you come back with a book? And he looks at her and he says, my dear, I could have brought back food. We would have eaten that food, and tomorrow morning we'd be hungry again. But we can eat from this book for the rest of our lives. So this is James Lackington. He's got a really deep spiritual part to his makeup. He's a very religious man. He's a very spiritual man. He believes in the power of books. He believes in the power of reading. He believes that it is powerful enough to raise anyone out of ignorance and make them the equal to any king or queen. And he understands that the main obstacle to this is the price of books. That the rich can afford books, the upper middle class can afford books, but even in early 1800s, it's going to start to stop there. So Lackington looks at the London book trade, and he sees that publishers like Shelley's Ollier and Byron's Murray, what they do is they decide, okay, I'm going to publish 500 of Byron's latest poem. And they do that. And let's say they only sell 300. This is all of London, but in all of London and all of England, maybe, there's only about 300 smart, rich people who are interested in Byron's poetry. So 300 sell. And out of those 300 come the reviews, the people who like it, the people who tell other people how great it is. But there are still these other 200 books. Well, what are they going to do with those 200 books? In no one's mind is the idea that they could reduce the price of the books and sell it to somebody who doesn't have as much money. This is one of those light bulb ideas. But it doesn't happen for the top booksellers all over London. It happens for James Lackington. And James Lackington starts going around to the big publishing houses, and he starts saying to them, okay, so you probably got all kinds of things that you can't sell. I'll buy 200 of whatever it is for this amount of money. And Lackington is doing all the math, and he's coming up with the scheme of how this is going to work. And the big publishing houses think, you're crazy. You're not a bookseller, you're a cobbler. Yeah, we'll take your money. And so they laugh at him behind his back, and they take the money that he's offering them for buying these books that can't be sold in bulk, and then he turns around and starts selling them for, not very much money at all. Suddenly there's a whole new way to buy books, and it's called remaindering. So James Lackington invented remaindering. And almost immediately he starts amassing a fortune. So what does he do? He builds the biggest bookstore in all of Europe. It's called the Temple of the Muses. It occupies this enormous section of London, probably 2 whole blocks. It's an enormous building. On the inaugural day, they drove a coach and 4, so a coach pulled by 4 horses. They drove a coach and 4 inside the bookstore, around the cashier's island, to show how big it was. They started that store with close to 250,000 books, which was totally unprecedented. This is in the late 1700s. We're not even into the 1800s when Lackington starts. And so they start off with close to 250,000 books. A couple of years later, in their financial records, now they've got over 500,000 books. And it keeps going like this until that store, Temple of the Muses, has close to 1,000,000 books in it. Wow. And it's the biggest bookstore in Europe. Not exactly what the critics said about this, kind of cheap secondhand place. They're making so much money that Lackington decides, I'm going to go into publishing myself. I can do a much better job than these other places. So he goes into publishing, and he publishes all kinds of books, every possible genre. And yes, he's one of the only publishers that will publish books on the occult and on weird and strange phenomena, but he does this because he knows the public loves these kinds of books. But that kind of a book is absolutely beneath the dignity of the kinds of publishers that they sent the book to first. And it would, even if they thought they could make money at it, they wouldn't do it because it would somehow cheapen their reputations. So that's going on here. To fans of science fiction, and anyone who knows the history of science fiction, there's no difficulty in understanding that science fiction in 1818, science fiction in 2015, still, though, this is the age of the ultimate revenge of the nerds, still not probably considered by the vast majority of people to be serious. Fun, sure. Entertaining, absolutely. But serious, probably, we're still not there. We're probably still not there. In 1818, they were definitely not there.